How you doing? Today I have my esteemed cohorts. This is Sean Daniels and Casey Murphy. Sean Daniels with Live with Tampa Bay. So Sean and Casey, take it away.
Great. Hi. First of all, thank you all so much for sticking around. So I'm the anti-stigma director for an organization called Live Tampa Bay, and it's our goal to try to reduce overdose deaths in the Tampa Bay area by 50% over the next 5 years. If you don't know, fun fact, Tampa Bay is one of the worst cities in terms of overdoses in the state of Florida, and Florida is one of the worst states in the country in terms of overdoses. In 2015, 1 out of every 10 overdoses in our country happened in Florida. So we work on that. The program, so those are not fun facts, I'm sorry. The thing we're working on right now is actually a program about sharing individual stories, about the belief that anti-stigma work and that sharing what it is helps people to be able to understand. We recently did a survey of everyone in Tampa Bay, and they said that people were more likely to share their story with someone who had the same illness that they did rather than a clergy, law enforcement, a family, a 12-step program, or an online effort. So really it was peer-to-peer work was the main thing that people were interested in. So we started a program, and the reason Casey's here, we collected 200 stories of people and we shared them in the Tampa Bay area. And actually on Wednesday, we just passed that our in the first 5 weeks, they'd been watched 8 million times by people here in the Tampa Bay area. And I was just telling Casey, which he didn't know before I told him, he continues to be one of our most popular stories in all 6 counties. So he's popular all across the Tampa Bay area. But it comes from the idea that there's that destigmatizing anything, mental illness, addiction, for people to be able to say that, you know, everybody quietly knows that they know somebody who suffers from these things, but to be able to, I guess, suffer loudly means that people are more likely to get help. And so that's why we want to work with this show. That's why we're so impressed by the work that's happening here and why we volunteered then to be a part of this Talkback today, to be able to answer your questions. So I did want to just pass it off real quickly to Casey for a second to give like the 30-second version of your story so that you can kind of understand the type of stories that we share.
Would have been nice to know that before the second.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Casey Murphy. I am an actor as well. I work for a local arts nonprofit doing grants work there. I'm a husband, I'm a father, but none of that would be true if I weren't in long-term recovery, which I have been for 12 years. I have substance use disorder, alcoholic, addict, all those things. But one thing I've talked to Sean about is how my story, I can tell it, but it's not particularly interesting or unique, and that actually is the power that it has, is that it's pretty familiar. When I start to talk to other people who have experience with this or who know someone, because everyone inevitably does, it's not particularly different than anyone else's. The details may be different or identical in some cases, and that's where the power of that comes from, I think, because it is very relatable and recognizable, and the more we can discuss it in open theaters like this or just, you know, in our normal day-to-day life, the easier it gets for someone else to see themselves in that and then feel more comfortable talking about it as well. And through talking about it, hopefully come on the other side of that and not feel as alone as these things can make you feel. So happy to be here. Thank you.
We one of the reasons why we're working together is I'm also a playwright, and I wrote a play called The White Chip that just had a run off Broadway. Oh, thanks. Yeah. My mother started the applause in the back there. That was it, yeah. And we were very lucky. When it was in New York, we had some high-profile people. Hank Azaria, John Larroquette, and Edie Falco came forward and were supportive of it to make it happen. But the thing that was amazing to us was that after every single performance, somebody would come up and say, okay, I'm ready to get help. And our actors were deeply unprepared for that. You know, they'd learned their lines, they'd done a great job, and then suddenly they're in the lobby. And actually, at the very first performance, some woman came up and said, like, okay, I'm an alcoholic, but I'm not sober right now. what do I do? And so we were like, okay, great. And so we started to put together the same thing that's happened here, that there's places for people to be able to contact. There's QR codes for people to be able to get help. And then 3 weeks into the run, she reached out again and said, I want to hear how it's going. I have 21 days as of today. And so those type of things. And the thing that always amazed me about it, right, is like, why, if you wanted to get help, would you go see theater? That seems like a strange thing to do. That's like, it's slightly expensive. It's only at certain times. It feels like there must have been other things that maybe could be your step forward. And then, of course, what we realized is that, and of course we all know this, and if you think about this, right, everybody goes to AA meetings, or some people go to AA meetings, and some people tell their story to other people, right, and then they don't die. And do you ever think about why that works? Why it works to go to an AA meeting and tell your story and it doesn't die? Because that's not science. That's not nutrition. That's not exercise. That's not any of those things. But you realize that the opposite of addiction isn't abstinence. It's community. And every time someone came into the show and they laughed like you all did today, they realized that suddenly it seemed a little less scary to admit that they needed to get help. Mm-hmm. And that after they'd been with a bunch of people and they'd listened to everybody on the way out be like, well, that's me, that's my uncle, that's my ex-wife. Suddenly that community was strong. And then they were able to admit that they needed help, right? And I think what's amazing about this show is it's doing the same thing. Right, that everybody talks about it, that you laugh about it, that we all laugh at things we didn't know we were going to laugh about. We laugh at things we feel like we shouldn't have laughed at, and then we talk about it on the way home. And that conversation, no doubt, changes lives and saves lives. And so that's the amazing reason that we're so supportive of this show, and we're so thrilled to be able to keep it going. So before we get to questions for you, though, I have a question for you to ask, because this is a talkback. What inspires you, I think, to tell your story? I mean, you say it somewhat in there, but it's slightly terrifying to get up and tell your story, right, night after night, and then you have to do it. It's you.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm a playwright, so when I did my show, I just hired someone like younger and skinnier to play me on stage, which I feel like is always like a solid pro move, right? But you get up and you tell it yourself. So what drives you every time to get up and tell your own story?
Excellent question, Sean. I think what drives me is I am turning my pain into purpose. I just feel what drives me is being vulnerable, being open, and I just got tired of running away and hiding, and I'm not going to hide anymore. And I just want to keep normalizing mental health. I just want to keep the conversation going, because what drives me is the more I can share my stories with the masses, the more silver lining there is out there, the more hope there is. But it's just, it's like that Rosalind Russell, just acting is standing up completely straight, being completely naked, and turning around very slowly. And I'm so blessed to do that every night.
What's been the most surprising reaction you've had from after you tell your story every night?
The most surprising reaction is just this urgency and immediacy of people to disclose their own pain or what they're going through, or there's this symbiosis or this simpatico that we're all connected in some way. I just feel the impact really hits them hard after just digesting 75 minutes. So I'm just, I've been called, Colleen Thayer, who's the executive director of NAMI, called me an ambassador of mental health. I mean, I'm getting all these adjectives and all that, and people are telling me how brave and courageous, and I didn't realize these things until now. It almost feels surreal. I mean, I'm going off Broadway too, and I can't, this thing started a little over 2 years ago, but the outpour of people feeling that I am kind of a guiding light. I am the hero of their heart. I'm giving them hope. I didn't expect that. I didn't respect that reciprocation from the audience.
Let me ask you, Casey, what's it like? I think it's somewhat triggering, right, for anybody who's gone through mental health episodes to watch such a true performance on stage. Like, what is your experience in watching the piece today as someone that has moved through trauma on your own?
Great question. I'm also struck by the bravery to do it, every night. That's a lot. And it's not. It's a lot because it's not a surface level. It's not like yeah this happened and then you're actually putting yourself into reliving it at times, which is not an easy or necessarily pleasant thing to do. It's very selfless to choose to go there for that. Sean, as you said, you had someone else do it every night, which is great. But to do it yourself every night, I think it takes a special ability to be able to relive that in ways, and I imagine there's a therapeutic element to it. By when you reach the end, to realize like those periods you just described are no longer that trauma is no longer as present or as salient as it was. Mm-hmm. But I commend you for it. I my hat's off to you.
Thanks, Casey.
That's tremendous. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say one thing that I was really blown away by. Jason, my brother-in-arms, my surrogate brother, who I love to the moon and back, had to remind me this is something that I didn't realize. I'm the audience's therapist for the night. It's not about what I need, it's what they need. Because then if it becomes about what I need, then it's freaking narcissistic and self-indulgent and a pure self-interest. But like Casey said, I just feel the selflessness. And I love every night getting up here and being in my sanctuary and being of service to all of you.
So amazing, right? Amazing.
Yeah.
And it's probably easier to feel that way now. I'm curious about like at the beginning when you decided to do this. Was there a moment where you're working on it with Jason where you thought, this is a terrible idea to get up and tell everybody everything I've done? Or from the very beginning, have you known, like, I have to do this and I have to share this story?
I just felt there was my dad approached me about this a few years ago and I wasn't ready because I was still living with the shame and guilt factor and concealing my pain. Then he came to me the year later, and I was ready. I just thought Jason, when he came into our lives after his 10-year run at FSD, he felt we had a wonderful idea. And I just ran with that, and I trusted him from the minute he sat down and we had our first few dialogue exchange. I just felt this is freaking amazing. This is awesome. And not only, what I really liked, Sean and Casey, what I really didn't realize too is I'm not just the actor, I'm the patient. So yeah, I just kind of, Jason, I went with him, I was willing to go to the end of the earth with him because I trusted him so much that he would capture my truth with elegance and grace and humor. So yeah, I was gung-ho.
And was there ever a moment where there was a part of a story that you didn't want to tell or was hard to work through, or you feel like it's all been right there?
I feel it's been all right there. Well, the part that was hard was that voicemail you heard. I'm still in the process of forgiving myself with saying, God should cut out that was to say those things, that I said those things to my parents. So I'm still working on forgiving myself. That was the hardest thing, that what I said to my parents, I remember as if it was yesterday. And I know I have to progress and not regress, but that was one that I had a hard time facing full-on assault.
We always say when working on like true stories, like if you want to write a good story, tell the audience something that you don't want them to know. And if you want to write a great story, write something that you don't want to know about yourself, right? That kind of honesty in it, we all understand.
Yeah.
And I love the idea that like it haunts you and your parents are like, I sort of remember that. I feel like that's such a parent response to be like, it was a lot. We were just getting through it at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, but my dad always, and my mother, who I love so much, they always, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to get into myself. They always remind me, Scott, when you lead an honest and right life, which I am now, I wasn't before, that past Scott is dead and gone. But he would always remind me that, when every moment is a chance to turn it around, and when you do, all the sinful actions that you committed against us will be a faded memory. And I'm, have a huge debt of gratitude and my love for my dad for being able to move on, because most parents would have been done with me, and for them to this is just so freaking surreal, man.
I'm sure. We have time for a couple of questions from the audience, if there's anyone. Yes, sir, right here.
Daddy, what was it like doing your first performance?
The question was, what's it like when you did your first performance of this?
Well, we did it literally almost a year and 1 day ago. It was terrifying. I feel like I think Casey can identify with this, and maybe Sean as a writer director. You know, if you're not if something doesn't terrify me or jolt me, it's not worth doing. I was, but it wasn't debilitating, terrifying. It was just like, whoa, you know, I got to do this. You know, there's a lot riding on this, but yeah, I'm always terrified. Even when I look relaxed and comfortable, you have no idea the million things going through an actor's head. When we make it look so easy, there's a million things going on. But I just was able to turn that terrifying feeling as adrenaline to fuel my mission, my message.
Great. Another question from anybody? Yes, right here.
Curious, how did you get to see the white ship? I missed it when it was at the opportunities here. I wanted to get to see it.
The hope is, the question was like, where can you see the white chip? Which I'm so glad you brought it back to me. Thank you so much. Hopefully it'll play again at some point. And it'll happen again. I don't know exactly when, but it definitely will. And there is like, if you want, find me afterwards and I'll find you, because there is a version that we did during the pandemic that's online, so that it's like in boxes and it's not exactly the same, but there's a way to be able to share it. But yeah, thank you. Other questions about Scott and the show? Yes?
I actually don't have a question, but I want to share with you that I have a son that one time asked me, and this is after he graduated from college and had a job as an electrical engineer, Mom, can you hear my thoughts or just my words? Mm-hmm. And tonight you said how parents, family members are struck by this. And it's really hard. And you did it so well.
You know, not mental illness is larger, but even when we talk about addiction, when they do the numbers of how many families it affects, and they say it affects 66%, which is 2 out of every 3 people, right? So that is huge, and that's not even mental illness, which is a larger group of people, right? So when people say like it's a family disease, any of them, you can everybody says like, well that makes sense, because any group of 3 people, 2 of them somewhere in their family have that's struggling. Yeah. Yes, sir, right there.
Hey, Sean. And Casey, question for you. During your struggles and to get to sobriety, were there mental challenges that drove you there, or this connection between mental challenges and addiction? Can you speak to that a little bit?
The question is like, what role does kind of mental illness play in addiction, and where's the crossover? So there's a big push right now to really talk about co-occurring illnesses, which is to say that if Freud said that all addiction is a malady of the spirit, which is to say that you have a hole in you and you fill it with something, right? And if you fill it with drugs or alcohol, it'll kill you, right? If you fill it with work or exercise, you probably get applauded by your friends. But you fill it. And so like step 1 is to stop filling the hole with that. But the real thing you have to do is then fill up the hole, right? And that's where co-occurring illnesses happen, that a lot of people use because they're using it to cope and to deal with what else is going in their life. If you had, it's so funny, I was thinking about this. It's like, I feel like I'm OCD in a lot of ways, and actually when I drank, I can really remember like drink 3, I could finally just breathe. I felt like I could finally just relax, and it was the same thing where it's like, oh well, so at some point like I did have to stop drinking or I would die, but like that's just kind of step 1. Step 2 is then like, how do you then identify what it was that you were self-medicating?
Because then if you don't, you're just going to move on to something else to self-medicate afterwards if you do it. So I think there is, in the concentric circles of addiction and mental health, it's probably just one circle. I mean, it's probably everybody that finds it easy to be able to use does it for a reason. There was this fantastic study that was done, I think it was by the MacArthur Foundation, and they said that the number one way you could tell if a teenager was going to become addicted to a substance was, did they feel more like themselves while using it? And if you've ever been addicted to anything in your life,
whether it's like shopping or running or work or whatever, it's like you feel that so deeply. It's like
if you feel more like the true you when you're doing it, you will get addicted to that. Right? So how do you, and this, I feel like the play does this beautifully, how do you feel like the true you on a day-to-day basis, right? When you're struggling and it's awkward and it's hard and it's like you have to face things. I don't know how you feel, but like kind of the amazing thing about getting sober is that you get to feel all your emotions. And the absolute worst thing about getting sober is that you get to feel all of your emotions. You know, people piss you off and you're like, I just have to sit with this? What do I have? Or like I'm ashamed and what do I do with that? I just have to I just have to sit in that shame. And sometimes you screw things up, right? And you fight with your partner or you say mean things to your kids. And then you say like, I have to try to make my amends and go forward and live with the choices that I've made, right? And I feel like that's the hardest part. And I feel like that's where they're right over each other. Do you have thoughts about that?
A few, but you said most of them, because every time we talk about this, it is surprising how a lot of our experiences line up and a lot of our thinking on it. But again, I don't think that's even unique. I think the more that you're like, oh, that's exactly familiar. Joel, I was telling you earlier that I think mental illness and addiction are great friends. They go everywhere together. Once I got sober, unfortunately, not everything was fixed. Like it wasn't like, oh, great. It was like, oh, there were other problems. I see. And I remember a therapist asking me like, when you were using, he was talking about stimulants. Did all of a sudden like things get? What did that feel like? And I was like, it felt great. He was like, no, what did Did things start to make sense now? Because everything made sense. And he was like, and I was like, oh, right. Because he was like, that's a coping. Like you were trying to address something else through something that you found that worked, that happened to be something that was going to kill you if you kept it up. But by taking that away, that solved some problems, but gave me plenty of time to look at the problems that got me there in the first place. So yeah, tremendous overlap, if not a complete circle. Like the Venn diagram, I think is pretty. They line up pretty good. So yeah, I think that a lot of what's being discussed here, they're very similar, and I think the audiences are similar. The people that are suffering through mental illness, but also their families, and then people who may not know that much about it, but have a friend or a coworker or whatever. I think there's a lot of audiences for a piece like this or like yours, and those audiences are probably very similar people, which is to say about everybody, because everybody in this room, I'm gonna guess, is touched by mental illness in some way. But I think almost in every room you're going to be in will have that. So I think there's a bright future for this, and your show as well. I think everybody should see them.
We have time for one last question. Who has a great one? No pressure. All right, sir, right here.
It's not a question. I just want to thank Scott and all three of you for putting yourselves out the way you do. In this world where scorecards are all over the place. Did I make more money? Did I employ more people? Do I have more clients? All those different things. You're doing something that doesn't have an easy scorecard. And you are like stones tossed in still water. You will never fully know how far those ripples are going. So thank you.
That is the best one to end on. You did great. That was good. Great. Let's have a big hand for Scott again for sticking around with us. Thank you all so much.